I ask consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Today, the Senate will vote on Alejandro Mayorkas, President Biden's nominee to be Secretary of Homeland Security. Up to this point, I voted in favor of the President's mainstream nominees to key posts. I'll have my differences with Secretaries Austin, Yellen, and Blinken on policy, but they were mainstream choices from the President. Mr. Mayorkas is something else. He does not deserve Senate confirmation to lead Homeland Security. Frankly, his record should foreclose confirmation even to a lower post. The problem isn't experience, not exactly. Mr. Mayorkas is all too familiar with the levers of power that control U.S. immigration law. The problem is when he's chosen to pull those levers and for whose benefit. As a high-ranking official in the Obama administration, Mr. Mayorkas did his best to turn U.S. citizenship and immigration services into an unethical favor factory for Democratic Party royalty. Governors, a DNC chair, Hollywood executives, a Senate Majority Leader from Nevada, they all received special treatment to a degree that stunned and disturbed the Obama administration's own Inspector General over at that department. His independent report blasted the, quote, appearance of favoritism and special access. We're talking about shoving through green cards as political favors and intervening to overturn denials. The IG confirmed this wasn't just about speed. Mr. Mayorkas' improper influence actually changed outcomes. This wasn't the first time this nominee abused an office for political purposes. Before his tenure at DHS, while a U.S. attorney, the nominee had helped his fellow California Democrats get a well-connected L.A. drug kingpin onto President Clinton's infamous 11-hour pardons list. The drug dealer's father was a major Democratic Party donor. Mysteriously, several notable California Democrats took an extremely keen interest in the case. Both Mr. Mayorkas and yet another one of President Biden's cabinet nominees, Mr. Becerra, came under scrutiny for their personal roles in the special treatment that was dished out to this donor's son. And when questioned about these actions, Mr. Mayorkas responded with false and conflicting statements, including while under oath. Reviews of USCIS under Mr. Mayorkas found intimidation and retaliation against employees when they were too focused on rooting out fraud instead of merely rubber stamping applications. According to some of his own employees, his leadership led to, quote, a culture of fear and disrespect. So, Mr. President, does this sound like somebody who deserves a promotion? Employees reported Mr. Mayorkas viewed the people applying to live here as the agency's, quote, customers, whom it was their job to please and satisfy. They said the crucial goal that defined his approach was not enforcing American laws, protecting American jobs, or defending the American homeland, but rather ensuring there were, quote, zero complaints from the customers. I'll close with one observation. Last week, I heard the Democratic leader compare the confirmation timelines for Mr. Mayorkas versus General John Kelly. General Kelly, an ethically compromised partisan lawyer versus a retired four-star general whom the Senate confirmed 88-11. The contrast could not be sharper. For one thing, I'd say Secretary Kelly understood that our customers, first and foremost, are always the American people. It's frankly remarkable that someone with this record is even up for a cabinet appointment. I'll be voting against his confirmation and urge our colleagues to do the same. Now, on another matter, the United States and democratic countries around the world are anxiously watching events in Burma. I've had an interest in Burma for many years, since I chaired the Appropriations Subcommittee for State and Foreign Operations. Just last November here on the floor, I cautiously celebrated Burma's recent elections. I warned that its military remained a toxic influence and an obstacle to democratic progress. And sure enough, the world was horrified over the weekend when Burma's military rounded up the country's civilian political leadership including Aung San Suu Kyi and civil society leaders. The military was afraid that popular support for the new government would yield the constitutional and economic reforms they've long opposed. So they've tried to simply claim control for themselves. I spoke with President Biden and Secretary Blinken yesterday about the situation in Burma. The new administration deserves credit for approaching the situation in a way that's bipartisan and coordinated with Congress. The world is watching. I hope and expect the United States will quickly make the obvious legal determination that this is a military coup and impose significant costs on the military for its attack on democracy. We already have sanctions in place against key military officials in that country, and Congress has already given the executive branch the authorities it actually needs to swiftly apply even more sanctions to the military and its infiltration into Burma's economy. But we'll also need the help of our friends and allies to effectively pressure the junta. It's time for freedom-loving nations to stand up for democracy and impose their own meaningful cost on the military junta. The Chinese Communist Party state news organ dismissively called the events in Burma a major cabinet reshuffle. A cabinet reshuffle? That's a joke, and the free world knows it. This is a military coup and an attack on democracy, plain and simple. There are two paths before Burma. It can continue to grow into a modern democratic country connected to the global economy, or remain a corrupt, impoverished, authoritarian backwater in the shadow of the People's Republic of China. The people of Burma have said which they prefer. They've spoken at the ballot box. The threat of force must not be allowed to silence their choice.
Hey, did you know we have a video podcast called WJ Live?
The Western Journal's mission is to equip readers with the truth. That's the exact same mission we have on WJ Live.
You'll hear from writers, editors, and special guests on the most important topics of the day.
You can watch it live every day at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific at youtube.com/WJ Live.
While you're there, help us out by subscribing and hitting the bell so you won't miss out on any future episodes.